The solar system does not exist the way you think it does. You can pull up any artist rendition on Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever the hell you want to pull up. Type in solar system images and you basically get the same crap. You get three-dimensional planets in a two-dimensional plane. That's not the way the universe works. That's not how mass and matter work. You and I do not exist in two dimensions. We exist in three dimensions. Everything in the universe exists in three dimensions. But if you look at pictures, artist renditions of the solar system with all the planets and the sun, they make it look like it's two dimensions. It's not. Because matter does not exist in two dimensions. It exists in three dimensions. Not four, not five, three. Three dimensions. What about time? Well, what about it? Time is not a dimension. Time is a measurement of motion. All motion occurs in three dimensions. That's all there is. There's no more than that. I don't care if you're a Star Trek fan. I don't care if you're a Trekkie. There is no space-time continuum. There's none of that crap. Time is not another dimension. Time is a measurement of motion. So if you look at a wave with the up and down wave that denotes water waves or frequencies, vibrations, they always show it in two dimensions. Well, that's not the way the universe works. The universe exists in three dimensions. If you think of a corkscrew and a spiral, that's the way our solar system exists. That's why you see galaxies, you pull up pictures of galaxies, you see spirals, because galaxies exist in spirals. The Milky Way galaxy exists in spirals as well. But they always try to show it and denote it in two dimensions. Still. And they try to add some three-dimension to it, but most of the artist renditions and pictures are crap, bullshit. So everybody thinks that the Earth and all the planets revolve around the sun. Bullshit. Because that would represent two dimensions. But in three dimensions, which the universe does exist in, which is the reality of our universe, the sun is out in front. So let me try to give you an analogy or something to picture. So let's picture like a tornado or a hurricane. So at the very bottom of that tornado would be like the sun. And the sun is moving through the solar system. Because it must be moving to exist, or it would die. I know that's hard to swallow. but the sun's moving. And in its wake, behind it, if you think of a tornado picking up trees and cars and stuff like that, well, imagine those are planets. So what's going on, actually, with the sun and the planets is the sun exists in an electric field. And this electric field gives off flux lines of flux to create an electric field. And in each one of those lines of flux is a planet. And those planets are actually following the sun. They're not actually revolving around the sun. They're following, they're tailing the sun. And that's actually how the solar system works. That's actually how the planets move. They move in spirals. In a three-dimensional universe, which we live in, which is the reality that we live in, all motion is spiral. It's curved. All direction is curved, and all motion is spiral. So the sun is out in front, that huge, massive electrical generator. That's what it is. And it's under so much pressure and there's so much heat that every once in a while a spark, an ember, gets tossed out of it. And those embers are planets. The first thing that was created was the sun. And through pressure and heat in the core, the sun expanded. It's like, how do I say it? Like a campfire. Every once in a while you'll hear a pop, and you'll see a little ember fly out of the campfire, because all that heat and pressure is eventually going to cause pieces of material to pop out of it. And so the way the scientists, I'm such a huge fan of scientists, as you can tell if you've heard my other talks, dialogues, however you want to, soliloquies, however you want to call them, discussions with myself. But hopefully you get something out of this. Anyways, the so-called scientists that believe in facts and crap, they say, oh, there was a cloud, and there's like these gas clouds, and the planets and the sun form from the gas clouds. Well, bullshit. There's no proof of that. There's no proof that the gases would do that. You know, because that's inferring that there's no uniformity. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Earth, it doesn't look like Mars. If you look at Mars, it doesn't look like Saturn. If you look at Saturn, it doesn't look like Jupiter. You know, there's no uniformity to the creation of the sun and the other planets. And why would the other planets not be suns? If the same gas clouds, they try to convince you that there's a big gas cloud, and they started spiraling, and then that's how they created the planets and the sun. Well, I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. And it's bullshit because of what I just explained. Because there's no uniformity. The planets come from the sun. That's hard to imagine, but that's the reality. The sun is the father of all the planets. The sun is an electrical generator. It's a magnetized object. It's an electrified object, and it has a huge electric wave field. And like, just imagine those comical radio antenna transmitters with the black wave lines going out in all directions, and just imagine that's the sun at the top of that radio transmitter tower, and all those black lines emitting from that tower is the electric wave field of the sun. And in each one of those electric wave fields is a planet. So, if you haven't figured it out by now, from what I'm saying, the Earth, when it was born, it used to be in the first position, the first orbit, in the first electric wave field flux line of the sun's electric wave field. So, in other words, the Earth used to be the very first planet, well, not the first planet, but it was closest to the sun at one time. And then when, Venus, right? Yeah. So, when Venus was born, it knocked Earth out of first orbit, first position, into second orbit, second position. And then when, Mercury? Yeah, let's go with Mercury. So when Mercury was born, it knocked Venus into second position, which then knocked Earth into third position. Eventually, Earth will be knocked into fourth position where Mars is at now. Don't ask me when that's going to happen. I don't know. But that's actually how the planets are formed. And that makes a lot more sense. Because, once again, the gas cloud model doesn't have any uniformity to it. So how do you explain the differences in the size, shape, and composition of the planets using the model I just gave you? So the very first electric wave field, the very first flux line closest to the sun, has the most energy. And it puts a lot of pressure on the planet. At the same time, the planet itself, in its core, is undergoing a lot of heat, which causes expansion. Now, the planets closest to the sun have a hard time expanding because there's a lot of pressure put on it from the sun's electric field. As the planets move farther away from the sun, their own internal pressure allows it to expand. Example, Saturn. And the electric field of Saturn got so weak that all the water escaped the atmosphere and ended up spiraling around Saturn. So the next planet would be Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest planet, and it's all gas. Why? Because the electric field of the sun got weaker. And so that planet's own internal core pressure allowed it, and heat allowed it to expand into the gas giant it is. As that gas giant gets farther away from the sun, it's gonna eventually have such a weak electric field, and the electric field from the sun is also going to be weak, and it's going to allow the coldness of space to hit that gas, which is going to compress it down back into a solid, aka Neptune and Uranus. And that's why the planets are the way they are. So if you look at the smallest planets are the ones closest to the sun, because they're under a lot of pressure from the sun electric field, which doesn't allow them to go through their own expansion that they would like to go through because of the internal temperature of their core. So the Earth has also gone through expansion. And the Earth is constantly trying to expand. And that's why we get oil. And that's why it makes gases and water and all those. It's so hot, and there's so much pressure in the core of the Earth that's what's causing earthquakes. When those pressures get released and the cracks, when those cracks and fissures happen, well, the gases trapped in the core are no longer trapped, and they're allowed to cool into elements such as water. Well, that's a compound. but into elements such as oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, iron, blah, blah, blah. So there's this model of the continents that is out there, but it's wrong. And they call it like Plantagenet. I don't know. I forgot what they call it. But anyways, so one of the models they have for the continents and the continents drifting away apart from each other is that the Earth was all water, and then all the continents used to be together as one continent. Well, that's wrong. All the continents, if you put all the continents together, if you look at a globe, you can fit, like a jigsaw puzzle, you can fit all the continents together with just minor variations of some landmass loss. But they basically fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Now, if you put all the continents together, that was the original size of the Earth. So the landmass of the Earth takes up about 25% of the Earth's surface. And the Earth used to be 75% smaller because the continents used to be the crust of the Earth. As the Earth expanded, the crust cracked. You see, there's no such thing as continental drift or plates or tectonic plates. That's all bullshit. That's all bullshit. Because the Earth has gone through expansion from moving from first position to second orbit around the sun, second position, to now third orbit, third position. And during those position shifts from first to third rock from the sun, the Earth has undergone expansion. And those cracks and fissures allowed some of those gases to come out, and it goes from a hot temperature in the core to a cooler temperature out in the atmosphere, which cools down the gases. And when you cool down a gas, it'll turn into a solid, or it'll turn into a liquid, and then eventually a solid. But that's how all the water came from the Earth itself. You didn't have clouds that just all of a sudden formed and created rain. You had the Earth undergoing expansion. The Earth is still expanding. And that's why you have earthquakes, and that's why you have fault lines like the San Andreas Fault and stuff like that. And that's why you have that Marianas Trench. But as the Earth expands, it releases its gases, and that's where we get our oil from, and that's where we get our salt from, and that's where we get our water from. And that's actually how the solar system works. Is first came the sun, and its electric field gathered up a bunch of gases, and the sun has undergone expansion itself over however many years. I don't want to pull shit out of my ass and say, oh, it's millions and billions and quadrillion years. Like, I don't know that. All I know is that the universe exists in 3 dimensions. And I know, so that makes the normal model that you see of the solar system, it's wrong. Because once again, it shows 3-dimensional planets in a 2-dimensional plane going around the sun. Well, that's not the way motion works. That's not the way matter works. Nowhere on Earth does that happen. So that information is wrong. Another reason why I know what I'm talking about is because the cloud model of how the solar system formed has no uniformity to it whatsoever. Now, the way I explained it explains why the planets closest to the sun are smaller. The planets in the middle are big, large, because they've had a chance to expand. And then they'll go through contraction again when the gases hit the coldness of space, and when their own I'm presuming it's their own electric field. Like the Earth has an electric field. And that's why objects fall to the ground. Not because of that bullshit gravity that they made up, but because of the electric field of the Earth. Now, the Earth is caught in the electric field of the sun. The moon is caught in the electric field of the sun and the electric field of the Earth. The planets are the children of the sun. The moons are the children of the planets. Now, I'm not saying that's true for every moon, because I'd be talking out of my ass. So maybe some moons have moved from here and there, or maybe just small pieces of matter have moved from here and there. And maybe some planets have collided and created moons. Whatever. I don't know. I don't want to talk out of my ass. All I know is that I know for a fact the Earth has an electric field. And if the Earth has an electric field, then all celestial objects must have an electric field, which means the sun must have an electric field. And I know that electric fields have waves and magnetic lines of flux. If you want to look at a magnet, iron fillings, and what you do with electrified objects, and that's how I know that we have lines of flux with an electric field. If you put down a piece of iron on a piece of paper with iron fillings, nothing happens. But if you send a current of electricity through a piece of iron, you've just electrified it. You've just turned it into what we call a magnet. And once you magnetize an object, it has an electric field. It has a polarity. It has a bipolar. It has a north and so we call it a north and south pole. And the interaction of those poles gives off what they call magnetic lines of flux. I'm calling those magnetic lines of flux an electric wave field. The planets exist in the electric wave field of the sun. And the planets were created by the sun. That makes a lot more sense than a gas cloud model that has no uniformity as to why it would create a sun and then planets. And why would it create the sun in the center? And why wasn't any other planet a sun? Like that makes no sense. Like there's no validity to it. There's no reality to it. It doesn't go with any type of laws of physics. It doesn't go with any type of three-dimensional thinking, the reality of the universe. What makes more sense is the sun created the planets, and as the planets get further away from the sun, they drop into lower and lower pressure zones from the electric field of the sun, which allows them to expand. And as their electric fields go bye-bye, and the electric field of the sun gets lesser and lesser, then those gases like Jupiter, once that Jupiter moves to where Neptune is now, it's going to condense right back down to a solid. As soon as its atmosphere lets all that gas escape and hit the coldness of space. That makes a lot more sense. And that's the way the solar system works, and that's how the solar system was formed. The first thing to form was the sun. Well, the first thing to form was an electric field. It's the electric field that makes the system in the first place. You need an electric field in place. That electric field starts, electricity moves through that electric field, which creates the inert gases. It creates elements, and the first ones they're presuming are going to be the inert gases. So the sun collects all these inert gases, and through frequency and heat and pressure and all that stuff, it starts making other elements. And that sun is going to expand over time. And as it expands, it's going to kick out an ember. And that ember is a planet. And that sun's been kicking out planets, children, for who knows how long. Because even the scientists are like, well, there's planets way past Pluto, and there's stuff way past there, and there's the Kuiper Belt, and there's all this other stuff. So, Pluto is one of the oldest planets, but it's not the oldest because there's stuff beyond it. And eventually, those old children, those old planets, will hit the very end of the electric field of the sun, of the solar system itself. And it might get crushed back down into energy, and it might get recycled back to the sun. I don't know for sure. I don't want to talk out of my ass. I just want to talk about stuff I know of. So that's the solar system. The solar system is the sun, and the planets do not revolve around the sun. They don't go around the sun. The sun is moving, and in a spiral behind it are the planets. The planets are following in the wake of the sun. So if you imagine a motorboat going through the ocean, behind it, it leaves wakes. And in those wakes, the first wave right after the motorboat is the strongest wave. And if you're water skiing, that's going to be your best wave to water ski over or jump over or do tricks on, is that very first wave from the motorboat going through the water. I don't care if it's a lake or an ocean or whatever, but it creates a wake. And that's what the planets are in. The planets are in the wake of the sun as the sun moves through the solar system itself. I'm going to end it right there, and I hope you get something out of it.